Welcome back to the Tomb, everyone. This is Tomb Talks with the Pharaoh. For today's episode, it's called Safe Words, and I have two very important guests with me today, and I'll have them go ahead, introduce themselves, and then we'll just get right into it.
Hi, I'm Master Arcane of the Crow Academy, which is an institute for domination, submission, and the fetish performance arts. And we focus on helping people learn how to get into and enjoy BDSM safely, sanely, intelligently, and hopefully with the long-term goal of building an incredible relationship with another person who is playing the opposite side of the coin from whatever this person's enjoying.
And hi, I'm Slave Daphne. I am Master Arcane's 24 live-in slave. I also help him teach BDSM.
You're my 24th live-in slave?
I said 24/7 live-in slave. All right, I'm going to redo that. Okay, I'm like, ADHD brain really bad today. Okay, focus. Okay. And hi, I'm Slave Daphne. I am Master Arcane's 24/7 live-in slave. I also help Master Arcane teach BDSM to couples all around the world and how to do this wonderful art form safely and to make sure that everybody enjoys what they're doing.
And I'll go ahead and say thank you for both of you for agreeing to come here and educate my audience, because I feel like sometimes with BDSM, with DS relationships, there's a lot of misconceptions about it. But before we get into that, I kind of wanted to ask, what's your origin story? How did you get into the world of BDSM?
Oh, here we go. Do you want to go? Or I feel like your story is a lot more exciting.
So the Reader's Digest version is that when I was a small kid, we're talking 5 years old, I was the only little boy on a street full of little girls. And so when it came to our childhood games, which, role-playing games, cops and robbers, cowboys and Indians, I had to play both the villain and the hero role. And a lot of those games involved role play and bondage, damsel in distress. That was the popular narrative of the time. It was in all the cartoons and comic books and everything. And that just sort of stayed with me. And then my very first girlfriend, she actually came out of the closet to me first that she was submissive and wanted to pursue exploring all of this. And the two of us then were in a 2.5-year relationship with lots and lots of bondage and role play and all kinds of fun stuff. And this was a part of my life until I moved to Europe in the 90s, where I really dove in headfirst and discovered the public fetish and BDSM scene and community. And that was the core of my life over there when I was living over there. And that's kind of how the Crow Academy came to be. Was I came back to America and continued to do that, continued to only have partners in my life who were compatible and the complement to what I was. I discovered that I absolutely prefer the dominant role, the topping role. And so I would seek out female submissives and female bottoms. I was living in the San Francisco Bay Area at the time, and it was very a thriving community and scene there, and very easy to find parties and events and clubs and meet people. And then the first actual Crow Academy as a facility opened in Northern California around the same time, end of the 90s. And that was when it became more of a project of teaching people how to do this successfully and romantically.
Thank you.
Awesome origin story. Unlike mine's a bit like, it's interesting hearing to his origin story, and you can really pinpoint like, yes, of course, it was all the cartoons that he was watching, the damsel in distress, where I feel like as a millennial, there was less of that in our cartoons, maybe like a little bit in like the Ninja Turtles and stuff. But I honestly could not tell you where this this desire to do DS and BDSM came from. I mean, I was very lucky growing up to live in a very sex positive household. Like, sex was not off limits. We always talked about it, how to do it safely. And hey, listen, it's okay that you have these urges. You're human. You're going to have these urges. We just want you to be safe. And so it was never a taboo subject. In fact, it came up quite a lot. And so I was able to sort of explore as a young adult my sexuality. And I just remember that me and my first boyfriend, we experimented quite a lot. And we did sort of try both sides, where I would be the dominant and the submissive, and we kind of switched back and forth. But, as the relationship progressed on, my boyfriend at the time was just sort of one of those people where he's like, okay, we've experimented. Sex should just be, sex. If it's not broke, don't fix it kind of people. Right. And so inevitably when we broke up and I went on to try to explore this with other partners, it kind of was just the same thing, whereas they would be like, yeah, this sounds great, let's do it. And then, once you kind of get going in the relationship, suddenly they don't want to try it anymore. And so I just was sort of left wanting and really wanting to like dig in and really explore what it was to try BDSM, what it was to try being a submissive. And that is one thing I learned in my first relationship, however, was that I enjoyed the submissive role more than the dominant role. And where I was living at the time, more north than San Francisco, Northern California, there wasn't a huge BDSM scene, or I just couldn't find it. Because I remember going on Google being like BDSM dungeons, in my area, and nothing would crop up. And this was before I knew about FetLife. And so I think that would have just opened up my world a whole lot more. But when I moved to Southern California, I had just gotten out of a really rocky relationship and was taking a couple months for myself to really like figure out what it was that I wanted. And I was living with my best friend and his wife. And he told me like, hey, I know you've always sort of like been interested in BDSM. Like, you should really look for somebody in that field. And I thought, yeah, what a great idea. And then I stumbled across Master Arcane's his website, the Crow Academy. And I mean, just absolutely devoured that website. I think I read everything on it that it had to offer.
Are you possibly talking about www.crowacademy.com? Crow is in a blackbird, academy is in a school.
Yeah. Insert advertisement here. Yeah.
Shameless plug.
One more time for the people in the back.
www.crow, like a blackbird, academy, like a school.com. crowacademy.com.
Yeah. And so so I reached out to Master Arcane, and I had some questions about that everybody has questions about, like, how do I get into this? How do I find a partner that's into this? And it's so funny because we just went back and reread my old emails, and this perception that I had about the Crow Academy, I thought that he had a like a place where he would teach women to be submissive for their other partners. Like, I thought it was like a legit school, right? So I was like, this sounds so cool, right?
Mhm.
So me, this like little country girl coming into the big city, I was just like, this is what it must be. He had to, I don't know how it happened, but I think he was like, no, that is not. I mean, yes, I do teach people to be submissive, but I don't have like a traditional school where that happens. I just teach people through Skype and in person and small workshops and whatnot, not like what you're thinking. And
she thought she had the fantasy that I had a castle in Romania and with 28 rooms, and everybody ran around with, trays all the time and high heels, naked, learning to
that's
eventually
not
do
what
this.
it was.
When some other
every
lord
morning you
or-
descend down with the
Yeah.
So I had to dispel her illusion a little bit there.
Funny.
That I was like, no, I'm a real person, and I teach people in plain English, and it's very down to earth. Now, the Crow Academy actually was an actual facility in Northern California several times. There's several different buildings we had. That was sold a while back, and we're actually looking at building the new one very, very soon, which is very exciting. In the meantime, the Crow Academy basically became an international resource And effectively, wherever we were teaching is where the Crow Academy was happening.
Mm,
Yeah.
okay. So
So
it's
that's
kind
our
of
origin.
like a traveling school.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a
exactly.
fair way to
Mhm.
describe it.
Yeah.
And with well, with both of your origin stories, that you said that Arcane, you said that you would step into the dominant role, and that's something uh, that you enjoyed. And then Daphne, you said that you would go back and forth. What does being a dom, like, what is, well, first of all, what is a dom, and then what does it mean for you, Master, Arcane, and then Daphne, uh, what is a sub, and then what does being a sub mean for you?
Okay, so real quick, just definitions of dominant and submissive. First thing that I want people to understand is that at the Crow Academy, we see BDSM and domination submission as art forms, just like painting, just like sculpting, just like playing a piano. The more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. There's a right way to do it. There's creative ways to do it. You will figure out what you like, what you don't like. Do you prefer oil paints? Do you prefer watercolors? Do you prefer the piano? Do you prefer the cello? There's many, many, many things to explore. There's literally 1,000 ways to play under the grand umbrella of BDSM and fetish. So amongst the many things people can explore is, do they prefer the dominant or the submissive role, or both, which is called a switch? And do they prefer the topping or the bottoming role, or both? And again, that's also called a switch. So domination and submission would be the psychological elements, giving up control or taking control over another person, obeying someone or being the one to command the other person. Topping and bottoming is the physical side. Do you want to be on the receiving end of the toys, or do you want to be on the giving end of the toys, like painting with sensation, if you will? A lot of people will find themselves to be either a dominant and top or a submissive and bottom, but you really can mix it up any way you can imagine. And believe me, I have seen every imaginable combination. And sometimes I'm still surprised if somebody has a new way to do it. So I definitely identified as a dominant top. With my first girlfriend that I mentioned earlier, I tried bottoming to her one time, did nothing for me, did nothing for her to top me. And that was kind of it. And we just realized that we both had our respective roles. We stuck with them. We had a lot of fun. So I identified as a dominant because I do enjoy, first of all, let me say one thing. If you're going to be a dominant and you're going to be a top, one of the first things you have to do is accept the fact that you need to be responsible for the well-being of the bottom and the submissive. It doesn't mean that bottom submissive is completely alleviated of all responsibility. Of course, they have to be responsible for communicating their needs,
Definitely.
and you know, having some good feedback for the dominant top to work with. But as a dominant, I found that I really enjoyed accepting that responsibility. It felt empowering to me. I loved painting with the sensations and the tools and the toys and the whips and the floggers. I love the look of bondage till the ends of the earth. It just looks amazing to me. And I like to get creative. And, you know, we in our house, we have literally 9, 10 different colors of rope just to be able to get creative with it and create designs with it. I have my aesthetic. Other people have other aesthetics. And I just found that it was always very, very, very easy for me. I found that I felt very good being responsible for the direction of a relationship in the case of a 24/7. I've kind of tapped into everything I ever learned about good communication techniques. I'm actually a minor part of my history. I'm a trained community mediator. So I literally have been trained how to listen to two people who do not agree and try to get them to come to a middle ground. And I bring all of that into what I do as a dominant. So even if I have the final say, even if I get one extra vote, even if I get 51% of the say, I still use all those techniques to bring out the best in my submissive. And I thoroughly enjoy that. It's a very empowering thing for me to do. It never feels like work. It always feels like, I said, like an artist creating. And that inspiration, that internal feeling of being inspired is really what pushed me down the dominant and topping path.
And when you say that it doesn't feel like work, if someone is in that dominant position and for them it is work, would that be an indication for them that they might not be like might not be a dom, that they might
Well,
or might not even be into BDSM in the way
what,
that a
yeah,
24/7 is?
what I would say to someone like that, and what I'd like to say to all of your listeners is when you're exploring the world of BDSM and DS, which again is vast, do the things that sound interesting to you. Don't necessarily do something because your best friend does it and they have a great time. It doesn't automatically mean it's for you. With so many ways to explore this and so many tools and toys and things to use and ways to play, what's important is that you find the stuff that does resonate with you. So in the beginning, if you've got a very strong inclination, great, pursue it. If you don't have a strong inclination, you're just curious, then I recommend trying different things. So if someone, as you just described, if someone's trying the dominant path and it just feels like a labor for them, it feels like work, and they're like, oh, this isn't even fun for me, then yeah, if you're still intrigued by BDSM, try the other side, try subbing, try bottoming. I've known people who are bottoms only. They don't have a submissive bone in their body, but boy, do they love being on the receiving end of the floggers or the paddles and whatever. Very masochistic. It makes their day. It fills them full of great endorphins, but they don't want to be told what to do the split second they come off the BDSM furniture. That's it. That's their whole scene. I know other people who are very, very, very into being commanded, or they're very into telling their submissive or their bottom what to do. It gives them great joy, but they don't really necessarily want to learn. Like I said, so many toys. They don't really necessarily want to learn all the different toys. I personally love all the toys, and there's always new ones being invented, to be perfectly honest. But there's some people who really only want the psychological part. Some people only want the physical part. Most people fall in the middle of the bell curve and they like elements from both sides. So that'd be my answer. Would be if you are trying one aspect of BDSM and it's not working for you, try the other aspects. Maybe you'll find out you're a switch and you like a little bit of this and a little bit of that, a little bit of both sides.
Yeah, and I would like to add, actually, just using that metaphor of what if somebody's being the dominant and they find out that it's too much work? I would ask them, did they jump into 24/7 right off the bat? Because I know that that is a huge mistake that a lot of newbies make.
Really
Is
good point.
that is
Could you
that they're
explain what
like,
24/7 is?
so 24/7 means that you are in your dominant or your submissive role at all hours of the day. When you wake up to when you go to bed, you are submissive or you are dominant. And I always recommend people don't even touch anything near 24/7 when you are first starting out, because you will burn out.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes when you're new, it can be very exciting, very adrenalizing to, fulfill your dreams. As you know, that was my experience first starting out. I wanted to try everything and do everything. And Master Kane had to be like, oh, okay, like slow down. We will get there, but we're going to do so in baby steps. So that was a great leadership quality in him. And I think that, again, somebody who's starting out as a dominant, they might have the ambition to be like, I want to have all control of your entire life, and I'm going to be the best leader ever, and I'm going to help you become the best person ever. And it's like, okay, that is some great aspirations, but if you are new, you might not realize how exhausting that can be, and so you might burn yourself out really quickly. So I would say that if somebody is really enjoying the dominant role but they find that it's too much work, I would scale it back. Try just doing BDSM in the bedroom. We always tell people, like, just role play it in the bedroom with your partner to kind of get a taste of what that's like. And then when the scene is done, and you guys can talk about, like, how did that go? Did you have fun? And if someone is still finding that being the dominant in the bedroom is too much work, like myself, then maybe try the other role. And that's exactly what I did. Is I tried the submissive role and I was like, this is so much better, this is way more fun. And so I always tell people to ease yourself in slowly into DS in BDSM. Take baby steps, because you're going to have a much better time and you're not going to burn out.
Yeah, very, very well said. I'm going to add that we'll tell people start in the bedroom. and or to start, make it a date night, and then doesn't have to be in the bedroom, of course, but make it a date
Right.
night, debrief afterwards. Daphne and I have done probably 1,000 scenes together, and we still debrief after almost every single scene. How did that go for you? What were your favorite parts? Was there anything that really didn't work for you or dragging you out of the scene? Because we both want each other to have a great time. Once you've gotten a couple dates under your belt, then maybe try a whole weekend. The term for that is a caller on situation. So the idea is that the caller goes on Friday night and it comes off on Sunday night. And for that duration of 48 hours, you have the DS roles in place. But I was going to say, being in a 24/7 takes a lot of serious commitment, and both people have to want to do it. That's another big part of it. If only one person wants a 24/7 and the other person, for whatever reason, maybe they just simply have commitments elsewhere, job, career, school, something that makes them unable to do 24/7, then it's not going to work. You need both people to be fully on board with it. And the other part is that as a dominant in the 24/7, again, you really have to embrace that responsibility. The dominant is a leader. The dominant becomes the leader of the relationship in a 24/7. And just like any other situation in the world, vanilla or otherwise, where you have to be a leader, you want to be a quality leader. You want to be setting great examples. You want to be showing people, inspiring them to want to be submissive to you, to want to follow your lead.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, so many questions. But before, I think I think there are some terms that we just need to define because some people might be lost right now. There are 3 terms that I heard: scene, scene, caller, and then there was one more. Okay, it's gonna come back to me. But
Okay.
scene.
All right, yeah. Okay.
Well, scene. The funny thing about the word scene is that if it's spelled with a small s, lowercase s, it means one thing. If it's spelled with an uppercase S, capital S, it's something else. Both of them inside the BDSM universe. So a lowercase s scene is like a session, like a scene that you have on the date during that night. This means when the 2 people are ready to start playing, the scene begins. And when they're all finished and all the bondage off and they're all, cleaning up and whatever, that's when the scene, lowercase s, has ended. Uppercase S, the scene, capital T, capital S, means the greater BDSM community.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sort of the easiest way that someone can remember like what a scene is, think about a scene in a play, like, and scene end, you know what I mean? So scene begin, that's when the dominant and the submissive begin whatever act it is that they've negotiated, and then when it's done, the scene ends. So that's just, think of it as in play terms. But yeah, the BDSM scene is another way of saying the BDSM community.
Yeah, capital S.
Capital S.
Capital S. Okay.
And then caller, the caller has many different meanings to many people. So I'm going to talk
Very
about.
subjective.
Is that a physical collar or
it is a physical collar,
okay.
just like a dog collar, or sometimes a lot fancier than a dog collar. A BDSM collar is generally differentiated from, say, a choker, piece of jewelry, in that the BDSM collar has an O-ring or a D-ring hanging from the front of it. Think of it as the place where you would attach a leash with a clip. So when someone's wearing a collar, it doesn't necessarily tell you right away where they're at or what is their position. It just means that they're probably submissive, probably a bottom. You can't assume that right away.
No, you cannot.
Overall, however, it does follow suit in that direction. So it's perfectly okay. I myself, back when I was single, I would see a girl in a BDSM club wearing a collar, clearly not with anybody, and I might go up to her and confirm, like, are you a bottom? Are you it depends what, if I wanted to, do a flogging scene and I was looking for someone to do a flogging scene with, I might ask, are you a bottom? In hardcore BDSM clubs where everybody there tends to know exactly what's going on, it's much more likely that yes, the collar means a bottomer or a submissive. If you're in, like, there was a club in San Francisco for years and years and years, where it's really a goth industrial dance club that had a BDSM play area. And so the gothic subculture, some of them would wear collars because they thought it was a piece of jewelry. So you did have to kind of confirm, are you wearing that as a piece of jewelry, or are you actually into the scene?
Yeah,
That's a good way to do it.
You had to
too.
vet them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, yeah.
you could actually just say, hey, that's a lovely collar. What does it mean to you? And you'll get a
Yes.
good answer 99 times out of 100.
And having worked at Hot Topic some years ago, we and being a submissive, I would always have that, like, a girl or a guy walks in and they're wearing what looks to be like a BDSM collar. I could never just assume. I remember the first time I made that mistake, I was like, "Oh, cool. Are you submissive?" And they looked at me like I had just spoken an alien language. I'm like, "Ah, got it." And I was like, is that like?" And they were like, "Oh no, it's just a necklace." And I thought, "Oh my God, that's what I get for assuming." And so I made it a point thereafter, anytime somebody would come up to me with a collar, I would ask them, like, "Oh, that's a really nice collar. Is it functional?" And either if they were completely vanilla, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, it's just costume jewelry." But if they were in the BDSM scene, then they'd kind of give me that look like, "Oh yes, actually it is a DS collar." And then we'd have this great conversation. But I want to say that maybe 1 in every 10 people that had a collar on was actually into BDSM and DS. So do not make that mistake of just
That was back
assuming.
when you're working at Hot Topic.
Yeah, Hot Topic or Spencer's, one of the two.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and so it happened a lot.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. But once you know the person is wearing a legitimate collar, and this, we just described like meeting people, within a DS relationship, collars, there's many kinds of collars. There's what we call a day collar, which can actually be very subtle, and it's meant for the person to wear at their casual job or career workplace. There can be what's called a collar of consideration, when a dominant is testing the waters with a submissive to see if it's going to work out long term. There can be, currently Daphne wears what we call an eternity collar, which is that I fully, absolutely have accepted her as my personal submissive and slave, and she has accepted me as her absolute and permanent master and owner and dominant. And so we symbolize this with an extremely fancy collar, that's from Europe, and it's made from titanium. It has like a little gemstone in the middle of just above the O-ring. And that actually never comes off. It's actually made to be worn 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And she's worn it in the ocean, in the swimming pool, skydiving, bungee jumping, just all the time. She sleeps in it, everything.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very important. One thing that's a nice, to give you an idea of the etiquette inside the BDSM world. Now, that's one thing about the Crow Academy too, is we are a high protocol, high etiquette style of domination submission. So I personally love the etiquette. I think it's fabulous and just really adds color and life to the whole thing. If you see someone else wearing a collar and they are not your submissive, then you never want to touch their collar without their explicit permission. You can think of, for some people, like Daphne's collar, it's like a wedding ring. It's a symbol of great commitment and deeply powerful and meaningful. So if you ever see a beautiful collar on somebody and you really want to get in close and have a look, you always ask first, "May I have a closer look at your collar?" And then,
Yes.
or "May I touch it? May I see it?" Like that. So very, very, very powerful symbol of the BDSM world.
Yes, definitely.
And that's very interesting how you said that it's almost analogous to like a wedding ring, because first of all, I didn't even know that there was levels to having to a collar. And well,
you can almost think of it like belts in karate. You know what I mean? Like, as someone's better and better and better, they get a different color belt. And so collars can progress like
you're
that
a black
as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. But that's not the case with everybody. Some couples don't even wear collars, maybe because they have a very professional career or they have kids and they don't want to expose them to that. So this is just the way that we do things. So in the Crow Academy, at least between Master Arcane and I, the metal collar is necessarily like a wedding ring. But I wouldn't say that anytime a dominant gives a collar to a submissive, it's the same thing. It could just be, I've accepted you as my submissive, I'm going to collar you. And that is not always, the equivalent of a wedding ring. In fact, I think it unless it's discussed between two people, that here is this collar, it is very important to both of us, please equate it to marriage.
I don't think that exact conversation, I don't think it exactly goes that way. It's more like people will, if someone says, I'm ready to collar you, it's making a claim. It's making a claim of fidelity. It's making a claim of mutual focus on each other. And it can be a starting point. Like Daphne's first collar was actually, we did a lot of role play, and it's called pet play, where Daphne would pretend to be a fox and I would be her human owner, as we'd have scenes in games like that. And so her first collar that I ever gave her, I had a bunch of collars that I just kind of have in my collection that are very pretty, and they have rhinestones, and they look really nice, and they all have the little O-ring on it. And she could wear those. But her first personal collar was aimed at her animal persona, and it was bright pink leather, very, very thick, bright pink leather collar. And we made a little ceremony out of it. I had another guest dominant and submissive friend of mine over. And then we all went out and celebrated that she was officially collared at that point when she got her own personal collar. Since then, there have been several other collars. Soon thereafter, she graduated, like I said, like belts in karate, she graduated, which is utterly subjective to the dominant when this is supposed to happen. There's no set amount of time, into a really, really pretty chrome collar that she had for a long time. And then she had one that was made out of chainmail that was really neat looking, that did just look like a regular piece of jewelry. So she was wearing that to work all the time until finally, I think we were together 3 or 4 years when I offered her this permanent collar.
Yep.
Oh, wow. And, because it's something that Daphne said, and before my ADHD brain runs away from me.
You too. Yeah, sorry, continue.
Both of you have used the term vanilla. That was the third one that I was, because sometimes people, sometimes most people will not know what that means.
Just really quickly, yeah. I'm glad you asked that, actually, because a lot of people, they need to understand that the term vanilla is not derogatory. It's not a cut down at all. The Kama Sutra is probably the greatest book on sex ever written, and it is completely vanilla. I think of all of the hundreds of pages, I think there's one page that describes biting and scratching. That is the only BDSM thing in it. So vanilla just means, when we're using it here, it just means not fetish, not kinky. That's all it means.
Yeah, think of it like as ice cream, right? Like vanilla, just vanilla ice cream. And what is kink? Maybe kink is chocolate fudge and some sprinkles and a cherry. So it just means like sex as it is without any accoutrement, essentially.
Daphne,
I think it's a good metaphor.
Cream, by the way.
I do. I'm a big sweet tooth, so everything is a sweets metaphor.
Okay. No, but Arcane, I'm glad that you brought that up, is about like how people perceive certain terms, because I feel like when most people are going to listen to this, when they hear the term slave, master, owner, and pet, I feel like those carry certain connotations that don't necessarily
you are so spot
transfer
on.
To the BDSM world.
100%. So let me give you a quick analogy. So if you're listening to this podcast, please listen very carefully. When you think of the world of BDSM and juxtapose that with the vanilla world, think of it like Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, and more specifically, Through the Looking Glass. So when Alice walked into the room where the looking glass was, on her side in the normal vanilla world, you had tables, chairs, grandfather clock, and flowers outside the window, and the mail was delivered by the ordinary postman. When she looked in the mirror, she saw the same world. She then stepped through the looking glass where the grandfather clock gave advice, the tables and chairs danced, the flowers sang, and the postman was a giant lizard. The point being that when you're just looking at these terms objectively, if you will, they have a lot of these terms actually have connotations out of history that can be very dark. Dungeon, flogger, slave, master, owner, etc., bondage. These can all have negative meanings if you're looking at them from the vanilla side of the looking glass. When you step through the Wonderland looking glass into Wonderland, into the world of fetish, the world of kink, all these terms have vastly even opposite meanings. So slave is a term of endearment. Slave is the black belt. Slave means the submissive has done so well and the fidelity is there so strongly and the communication is so good and the love and the affection and the energy exchange is so spot on that at some point the dominant has said, let's do this 24/7. I want to be your owner and I want you to be mine and mine alone, my slave. And the slave on the opposite side of the same coin is thinking, you know what, I could do this all the time. I only want this person as my owner. I only want this person to be the one to embrace me with all these BDSM toys and the ropes and whatever. And I'm going to call them my master or mistress, by the way. It's not, none of this is locked into a specific gender. And that's actually very important if you want to come back to that later. That's one of the big misconceptions, that somehow the roles are locked into a gender. That's completely not true. So mistress or master, the bottom of a long-term devoted relationship like that is usually called a slave, whether they're male or female or anything else. Dominant, submissive, all of these terms that they move forward. Now, the difference between domination, submission on the fetish side of the looking glass is, ready, big word coming. It is consensual on both sides. Both people want it, both people desire it, both people are fully invested in it. Compare that to a dominant and submissive hierarchy in an ordinary cubicle corporate workspace where maybe you hate your job, but you're getting a paycheck. So you're submitting to the people above you, the managers, whatever, for the sake of getting the paycheck. It's a begrudging submission. It's not necessarily forced. There is a level of consent to it, but it's nothing like fetish, kinky domination submission. So that was a great question, because yes, these terms really do separate into wildly different sets of meanings, depending on which side of the looking glass you're on.
And yes, because when I first started just kind of like researching BDSM and things like that, and then came across your channel and other channels, and just curiosity, just seeing like what's out there. When I came across the term master and slave, I'm just like,
what's this about? Yeah.
No, you know what's funny is that I've actually there's this topic can be expanded a lot, but the short version is that you are not the first person to have that experience. And we look at each other, those of us in the community, those who have been in the community for decades, and we have to acknowledge that even though we understand we are titillated by these terms, that they do have that secondary vanilla, negative, historical, ancient, millennia ago meanings. And we sometimes wonder, is there a better way to phrase this so that we really separate ourselves from the negative connotations of the past and out of history? And oh, go ahead, babe.
Oh, I was just going to say, you do find people who are like, no, I'm sorry, I cannot remove the negative connotation to call this person master or this person slave. And so what you'll find sometimes is that people will come up with their own terms, their own titles that are essentially equal to what those terms are. And so you do find that. And I know that there's also several different types of DS relationships. A really popular one I've noticed kind of crop up over the last 5 years has been big and little. And so and that kind of has its own community. And that's, I believe, like a sub-genre of DS. And so you'll have big and littles, you'll have...
You should probably explain what a big and little is.
Right. So big and little is a form of DS where the big is the dominant and the little is the submissive in a sense. And that is usually sort of like the big is sort of like the dominant caregiver, and the little is the submissive that likes to receive the care, essentially. And that can include a myriad of things, but essentially it is caregiver and person who is receiving care is sort of the breakdown of what that role is.
And also the little could be considered somebody who they can have a bit of regression, age regression in their role as they play it to a greater or lesser degree. Common one is that people who are really into the big little aesthetic, very common actually, is stuffies, stuffed animals. They will collect stuffed animals because it takes them back to that feeling of being youthful and maybe having less responsibility in their life.
Yeah, that's a big one.
And it helps them kind of let go and shed their current responsibilities that they have in their adult life, which can be pretty thick for some people.
Yeah.
The big
Bill's being one of them.
Yeah, Bill's being one. No, no
exactly.
joke, no joke. Yeah. Hey, seriously, that is one of the reasons people do get into the kink world. Is it is a way to step outside of the normal, everyday, mundane world very easily and with great passion. But I'm saying the big then is somebody who really enjoys being, as Daphne said, the caregiver, the person who is looking after this person as they enjoy these semi psychologically regressive states of mind by choice, fully and willingly. And the other person enjoys that sort of the big can be male or female, so that paternal or maternal energy really cranked up, even though they're dealing with another adult.
Mm-hmm.
And so go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's fascinating to see like all the different like subgenres of DS and to see like the terms that people use that they come up with themselves. It's really quite fascinating.
And I wanted to ask because Arcane, something you said is like it's a willing regression into like a certain role or like age wise. And I guess that kind of made me think about is that if you're in the
yeah, they get to act like a kid, they get to act like a kid. The adult gets to act like a kid. The adult gets to throw aside adult responsibilities and be intentionally immature, provided the dominant is the kind of dominant who likes to field that. This is where you get very specific in the way there has to be a bit of a lock and key effect between the two roles, whether it's dominant, submissive, master, mistress, and slave, big and little. It's very important that the other person is a complement to what you are.
Yes. Mm-hmm. It's like it's not going to work out if you have two tops or two doms trying to fight for, I guess, leadership.
Oh, yeah, that doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly.
But what I wanted to ask is that for someone who's who wants to get into it, or someone who's been in it and is just kind of dating around and checking out the scene, how do you how do you distinguish between someone who is actually into the lifestyle and willing and it's a healthy versus someone who might be using it as a form of escapism and an unhealthy, maybe borderline like mental health type of thing?
Great question. And there is not a simple answer because the BDSM community, globally speaking, is massive. And you're going to get all kinds, like a bell curve. You're going to get a lot of people who are into it for the right reason. You're going to get people who come into it because they think it's a new trendy way to get laid. You're going to have people come into it who literally they have, power tripping control issues Either they feel a tremendous lack of control in their life, and so they're going to go into BDSM as a way to gain control in a very two-dimensional sense, not really on a humanistic level. And, on the other side, you might have people who they just need that level of intensity to feel normal all the time. And again, that's not going to really work out unless they find someone who's a really good complement to that. The term for that would be edge players. Edge players like to play BDSM on very intense levels. The word edge has nothing to do with a knife, even though knives are toys you can use. Like if you take a knife and just kind of drag the edge gently on the skin, there's a word for that. It's actually a toy technique. So you're not actually cutting anything. But anyhow, people who are into edge play, which means the edge of one's mental, emotional, or physical capability, really need to find a complementary person who's into it from the other side to go to those very, very intense levels. So people can be into it for a lot of different reasons. You do find people who come into the scene for the wrong reasons. And the simple, it's usually pretty easy to spot these people too. They themselves may come from a traumatic background or traumatic childhood. And as adults, they come into the BDSM community hoping to find a strong figure who will help them magically bypass their trauma.
Free therapist, as we say.
Well, they actually, what we say is that a dominant is not a therapist. That if someone has actual situations where they should be in at least a free co-counseling peer group or something like that, we will tell people, that's really what you need. You're not going to find the answers you're looking for in the BDSM community. If someone comes into the BDSM community because, they have some sort of inner anger, aggression, hatred, something like that, and they expect to, pick up a whip and take out these aggressions, or strip someone of their rights, because they think this is going to make them a better person or more powerful, we'll tell those people, hey, put that down and go take up stamp collecting. This is not for you,
Yeah.
This is a consensual and within a couple loving situation that we want people to enjoy and explore. The one great analogy that we've always heard about BDSM is to think of it like an extreme sport. So if you get into extreme sport, let's say bungee jumping, there's risk. The risk can absolutely be minimized. There's a lot of consent before you go bungee jumping. There's a lot of fun to be had. There's great adrenaline, great endorphin release. And when you decide you're going to engage in the extreme sport of BDSM, you want to be fully informed. You want to know what you're getting into. So as Daphne was saying earlier, you start lightly. You start gently. You explore a little here, a little there. You debrief a lot. You just keep checking in. There's a lot of checking in. Earlier, you mentioned vetting. So if you're really thinking of exploring a DS relationship with somebody, it's perfectly okay. It's expected that you're going to vet them, and they will vet you. And they'll want to know who you are, what your background's like, all these sorts of things.
And that actually segues great into my next question, is that with vetting someone, is that like how, for both of you, like how do you spot like I guess I don't want to say fake. No, I'll say it. Fuck it. It's my channel. It's like, how do you spot like a fake dom or like a fake sub? That's someone that's just pretending to, because that's what they think you might want to hear.
Oh, okay. Well, I've seen this happen. I've seen guys come into the BDSM community, both as dominants and as submissives, thinking that, like I said earlier, it's the latest trendy thing they need to do to get laid. And it's a bit like, deciding you're going to go, take a walk in the woods and discovering you've just stepped into a wild animal park. So those people really quickly learn that there's a lot more going on than they expected. And the people for whom this is a real, everyday, fun, beautiful, artistic part of their life, they will look at these people coming in for the wrong reason, and it's not hard to identify them. Either they refuse to learn, they have no desire to take classes or get better or learn how to do things intelligently, correctly, safely, sanely. They abuse consent. They try to force the other person into the kinks that only they want to do without the other person confirming that they're on the same page and want to do the same kinks. So it comes to the surface really fast. And this is another very important part for your listeners. So again, listeners, please tune into this, what I'm about to say. There are enough classes and books and websites out there that you can get fully informed and have a good idea of what you're stepping into. This is a world where even though we play the transference of rights, like I said, the dominant getting 51% of the vote or one extra vote or however you want to think of it, what's really happening is there is an enormous amount of mutual respect in both directions when this is working successfully. And it should be tangible and you should be able to feel it and it should feel good. Doesn't mean you can't push the intensity. Oh, yes, you can. We push the intensity all over the place. But even with the intensity being pushed and you fulfilling your kinks in whatever form it is, there's always that sense of you really want every scene to conclude with the feeling of that was awesome. Can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, and I would say from the submissive side, it is imperative that you properly, but I mean it's imperative for both the dom and the sub to properly vet the person that you're thinking of playing with. But there should always be a sense of this person is willing to negotiate with you. Like there's an open conversation about it. It's not just one person saying, I want to do this, and if you don't want to do this, then we can't ever speak again. You know what I mean? And those are some warning signs to kind of to look out for. Is there an easy dialogue going between you and this other person, and are they easily able to negotiate with you about what your needs are and what their needs are?
And even then, yeah, I was gonna say, even then,
Yeah.
that even if you talk to them and you're having a nice conversation, because this is a very reasonable, very normal part of what goes on every single day in the greater global BDSM community, you might find that your kinks are not compatible, but it should conclude on like, hey, it was nice meeting you. I'm not really feeling the chemistry. Have a good one. You know, there should never be like the way you described it was like, my way or the highway.
Yes.
That is a warning sign if they're like that. They're
Yeah, absolutely.
nice about having different kinks.
Yeah, or if you say, okay, well, here's what I want to do, and then they say, okay, well, this is what I want to do, and if you find that your kinks don't line up, and as Master Arcane said, if they say, okay, well, unfortunately, I don't think this is going to work, great. But if this other person is like, oh, the fact that you don't want to do this means you're not a real submissive. The fact that you don't want to do this means you're not a real dominant. Like that's a red flag. You know what I mean? But also, more often than not, it is always good to find somebody in person and not online, because people that you meet at workshops, at dungeon parties, it's always better, because usually if that person is in the public, if they're playing in public, and if they're out within the BDSM community, that means that they usually have people who can vouch for them. And so we always recommend getting some, what's the word I'm thinking of? Like references, like, hey, do you have any references, and you can talk to those people. And especially if you're in person, and they say, hey, yeah, I totally know this person. He's a great guy, or yes, she's a great gal, or they're a great person. I definitely
that's
think
a part of vetting.
Yes, exactly. And so we at the Crow Academy, we recommend highly that people, if you're looking for a partner, to meet them out in these public spaces, at workshops and at play parties, at munches,
meeting someone in person.
Meeting
someone in person and getting a reference is a great way to verify their character, that they have a good reputation, that they know what they're doing. And if you are new, whether you're the dominant or submissive, be sure to tell people I'm new. It's okay to be new. In fact, it's really fun if both the dominant and the submissive are kind of new and they're exploring together and learning together. Online dating is just a reality of this day and age. People meet each other on Tinder and find relationships, surprisingly enough. So it's not that online dating is bad, and it will happen. I've had very good success with some online dating myself. But at the same time, you got to be intelligent about it. You got to be smart.
Yes.
If you're going to try online dating. I have 3 rules that I tell people. The 3 rules of online dating is, number 1, you need to verify that it is the person in the photo. That's usually done by webcam, and that usually happens after some trust is built. Number 2, you need to find out and confirm that you really do get along, that normal compatibility is there. That's always very important. If someone is completely off on one political spectrum and someone's completely off on the opposite political spectrum, that could be reason to lock horns, or maybe not. You don't have to bring politics into it. That's very true. And number 3, there are people who go online and their whole life is online and they never really intend to meet in person. So you really want to just enjoy the experience, enjoy the online conversation until such time as you're meeting them in a good public open spot during the day, like at a coffee shop for your first meeting, where either one of you can decide, yes, let's move this forward, or no, it's not working out. And you've had a nice coffee and a nice conversation, you go your separate ways.
Yeah. So just, I don't want to sound like I'm cutting down meeting people online, because I know it's out there. It's a very easy way to meet other people. What I was trying to say was that vetting people online is going to be that much more difficult. And so you're going to have to be more diligent. And so I recommend to people who are new to go out into these public spaces to meet others, just so that they can actually get into the community themselves, and be more familiar, instead of just being like, I'm brand new, I'm going to talk to this person online, I have no idea what to expect. So at the very least, I recommend that people go out and take a couple of workshops, really get into like the cornerstones of what BDSM and DS are. And I know that can be a bit scary, but if you talk to people who run these events, the munches and the workshops and the play parties, then more often than not, you can tell them like, hey, listen, I'm new. Can you, kind of help guide me through this process? I don't have anybody to go with. And more often than not, they'll be like, yeah, no, absolutely happy to help. We'll introduce you to some people, this, that, and the whatever. So it's worth putting yourself out there as somebody who is new and has not tested the waters whatsoever. Absolutely.
And again, just remember that whatever you try when you are testing the waters, there's so many ways to play that if you try something and it doesn't work for you personally, there's plenty of other things to try. You don't have to stick with something just because someone else said, oh, that's the way it's done.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yes, because I think that because of, sorry. There we go. I think because of a lot of the media, and this is something I wanted to talk to you guys about, is that, like, especially like with movies, how movies have portrayed like BDSM or DS like relationships. It's like, I think it's kind of given people misconceptions of what it actually means, because Daphne, something that you said is that if a dom is not willing to negotiate, when people, the vanilla people, think of a dom is someone who's like highly aggressive, highly assertive, just like, it's like uncompromising. It's just like it is my way or the highway. And
that is an image that we are seriously at the Crow Academy seriously trying to change that image, which you're right, it comes from bad movies and bad TV shows.
50 Shades
and we're
of
trying
Grey.
to, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Shiver. It's we're trying to reframe it that the dominant, the master, the mistress, that they are the artist at the canvas of their submissive or bottom. And we want to emphasize, think creatively, put your ego aside. We have expression, ego is the enemy of art. So put your ego aside, tap into your creativity, and see if being a dominant or a master or a mistress, see if you can create something beautiful with that energy. That's a
Yes.
major part of the Crow Academy, what we're trying to teach people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, as far as movies and TVs go, there's not a lot of good representations. One of the best ones, if you haven't seen it already, is the movie Secretary,
I've
which
seen it. It's
is a
good.
charming, lovely story. It's about 75% on the mark. They unfortunately, for the sake of a Hollywood plot, had to make it that this passionately submissive woman, started off as a self-cutter, and it gave the misimpression. It added to the misimpression of, oh, submissives or bottoms must be damaged people, which is nonsense.
Mhm.
And he, the dominant, almost more funny, he was terrified of his ex-wife, and he had all kinds of guilt and whatnot that he was processing in his character in the movie Secretary, which, if you looked at his actual skill level and what he was capable of doing, dominants who are still processing their guilt and their fear and their anxieties about being dominant do not tend to be as skilled as he was in the film. So there's some misconceptions in that, but otherwise it's really good, and it's a very charming story, and I can recommend that one at least. But yeah, for decades and decades, the people in the BDSM were always the serial killers or the criminals or something, you know, and they've just, Hollywood has just run with that for so long. It's unbelievably silly in terms of the real world. 50
Yeah.
Shades of Grey is you know what? Rather than sit here and say what everybody else already knows about it, I will just say that the best thing about 50 Shades of Grey is that it opened up the conversation on an international level. Here's a fun fact for you. Last I checked, 37 adults over the age of 18 literate adults over the age of 18 on Earth has obtained a copy of 50 Shades of Grey. That includes illegal downloads of the ebook, book sales, UNESCO statistics of adult literacy, etc. So, you know, overnight we watch people come from being in the closet about BDSM to feeling like they could finally talk about it. So that's the best thing to come out of 50 Shades of Grey.
Mhm.
The characters, everybody knows the characters in 50 Shades of Grey are not representative of smart people in the community. They are both a
Yeah.
couple of train wrecks.
Yeah.
Well, I
And
would say the second best thing about 50 Shades of Grey, they're not making any more. So
yeah, right. That
Oh
chapter
yeah.
is over and
Oh
closed.
yeah.
Yeah, I think also, I don't know how much you want to get into this, but I know that over recent years, some of the words dominant and submissive are getting misconstrued in a vanilla way. You do have these misogynists out there that call themselves quote unquote alpha males, right? And they're all
yeah,
like,
like
be
the
dominant
red pill
men.
community.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, be
Yeah.
dominant
I was gonna ask you
men.
about that, actually.
Yes. Okay. So it's and we as a community are really trying to work on reclaiming those words, because that community, the alpha male community, has definitely like taken our words from us and really just made them bad. You know, all men are dominant and all women are submissive.
Well,
You
I
know.
wouldn't even necessarily say that they've taken our words from us, but they are using those words in an extremely, again, antique, historical, anachronistic definition that has little or nothing to do with kink.
Yeah.
So trying to present themselves as kinky people is actually them not even understanding what they're doing. And like I said, this idea that the world of dominance belongs to men is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. Some of the finest dominants walking this planet today are women. And I would have to say, if you asked me to sit down and make a list of great male dominance and great female dominance and great transgender dominance, I'd be able to make a list of all three equally. So yeah, it just the idea of people trying to co-opt one or the other side of the BDSM coin it's a bit silly. It's not winning any popularity within the actual BDSM community.
Right. But it is important for people to make the distinction like, okay, because somebody pointed out the other day, like, unfortunately, if you go on YouTube and look up like advice for dominant men, right, you're just going to get a slew of utter nonsense. You know what I mean? And so it can be very confusing, especially for men that are wanting to become dominant, to find proper education that does not stem from misogyny or just completely just off base views. And so it's important to make the distinction like, okay, is this person coming from the kinky world or is this person coming from the vanilla world? And that's, I think, important to find out
Yeah,
very quickly.
that's a really good point. Yeah, before you take someone else's definition of dominant or submissive, etc., just ask yourself, where are they coming from? Are they
What
trying
side
to?
of the looking glass are they?
Yeah,
Are they
exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think and especially because I've seen a couple. Well, yeah, I've seen a couple of the videos where exactly what you said, Daphne. It's like the people are like, all women are submissive. Da, 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 da. It's just like, I think people need to understand the difference between being submissive and being submissive and being a submissive. It's like they're two completely different things. And being dominant and being a dominant.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And I just kind of wanted to cycle back real quick because when we were talking about the clubs and dungeons and like vetting people, making sure that you have like they can have references, it's like, what are some of, I guess, the safeguards in these clubs or dungeons so that things don't go like awry?
Let me give you two examples side by side. So the first one is going to be a club that I would not recommend. The second one would be a club that I absolutely would recommend. I'm not going to name any names of clubs or venues, but these are both real places that I've been to. So the first one, you walk through the door and the club is promoting itself as very, very sexy. And you're expected to be an adult. You're expected to handle yourself. You're expected to know what's going on. And yet you walk to this club. It's extremely darkly lit. You can't necessarily see around every corner and whatnot. You or your partner might find themselves getting groped. No joke. You might find people positioning themselves in doorways or something to block your path because they think they have the right to invade your space. And overall, you're just sort of expected to participate, if you will. And the idea of a negotiation before anyone touches anyone, or permission before anyone touches anyone, is just not even on the table. So that is the kind of place I would avoid. Now, the kind of place that I would recommend, they very openly state such things like absolute vocal spoken consent in both directions. Do not touch anyone without permission. As a BDSM club, they probably have house safe words like red, yellow, green. The stoplight system is the most common one. Mm-hmm. And so the safe word in some places just the word safe word. I actually knew a club where that's what they did. And the idea being is that if the other person uses the house safe word, because maybe they're new, maybe they're just trying out some BDSM toys for the first time, someone uses one of those safe words, then they stop. You just stop. There's no questions about it. They will probably have monitors of some kind. They're called dungeon monitors or play monitors, which will be easy to find and identify. They might have a glowing wristband or a light around their neck or something else that you can clearly tell who they are, where they are. All of the BDSM furniture will be in relatively, it doesn't have to be bright light, but it'll be lit enough so that you can see what you're doing. If you're swinging a whip, you want to know very clearly where you're swinging it.
Yeah.
There'll be some sort of designation of like, this is a play space. There'll be some sort of house rules, like please keep your voices down if you're standing next to someone playing, so you don't distract them or interfere with their scene. A lot of politeness, a lot of etiquette, a lot of making, especially the submissive in the bottom, feel like they are in a safe place. That's the kind of place I would recommend wholeheartedly.
Absolutely.
And the good news is that there's more of the latter than there are of the former. A lot
That's
more.
good.
Once you start tapping into the global BDSM community, and maybe you go on FetLife and you look under places and find some clubs and classes, most of the time they're going to be smart people who want to make sure that the people attending their event feel safe. So that's definitely some good news there.
Yeah. I would say any club that has like a list of rules that they absolutely want you to read, and there's like a password, somewhere in there. Not all clubs do this, but good ones, I think, too. They want to make sure that you understand the rules before even stepping foot into their club. I think that is a green flag. Any place that has you do a sort of orientation before you can even get into this club is a green flag. So just
green
be on the
flag, by the way,
lookout.
is just in case no one's ever heard the term, it's the opposite
Right.
of a red flag. So red flag means
Yes.
avoid, green flag means seek it out.
Yes.
Okay,
Go on.
Thank you.
because I guess with like when I would think about certain like BDSM clubs and things like that, and it's just like, because I know some people go as couples and then some people go by themselves, either men or women, and I just always thought about, it's like, especially for like the women, it's just like, because you can't have these guys that are fraudulent and doms that are just there to pretty much try to take advantage of someone. It's just like, what are like the safeguards that they have to make sure like stuff doesn't happen? But Arcane, as you were saying, is that it's pretty well, like the terms are pretty well defined before you even get in, or right when you get in. It's like you know what's up.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
or, sometimes if you hear about a club that, they actually told someone like, hey, you got to leave because you're not following the club rules. On one hand, you might think, wow, that's really strict. But the truth of the matter is that might be the kind of place you want to go to, because it means that the people running the party or the event or the club actually are going to enforce their rules. And that's a good thing.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, the right types of BDSM clubs that are out there, they are going to have these safeguards in mind. They're going to tell you, hey, look for the person wearing the glowing wristband, look for the person wearing XYZ around their neck. Those are going to be your dungeon monitors. And so if you have problems of any kind, you go to those people, you tell them what your issue is, and they will handle it. And so just knowing, especially as a woman, a single woman going out into these venues, just knowing that you have that, and is just, it makes you feel so much safer. And especially coming in and seeing all these rules, like, ask before you touch, consent is key, this, that, and the other. It does make you feel like you've kind of come into the right place. So if you ever go to a BDSM club and they don't have dungeon monitors and they don't have a list of rules, you just be on your toes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that.
Yeah. And I will add that even as a dominant, if you're experienced and you have a lot of your favorite toys that you want to use at a new club you've never been to before, you might want to make sure that those toys are okay, or if you need special permission to use certain toys. So for example, one of the things that I teach classes in is called fire play. And it is literally where I'll make a very, very tiny flame, like no bigger than a golf ball. I'll make it kind of crawl around my submissive's body. There's a million safeguards. So I do not recommend anyone ever try this without proper training and proper instruction on how to do it. Because if you do it wrong,
Yeah, that sounds like top tier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The point is you could literally consider me a professional at fire play. I literally get paid to do fire play shows. And at the same time, even though I know how to do it inside out, outside, and upside down, there are plenty of venues, really good clubs, where they're like, nope, not here. We are not taking the chance. You cannot do it here. And the point is, again, there's so many ways to play that I just don't bring my fire plays toys with me to that club. I bring other toys, floggers and paddles, which are fine.
Okay. Now I just need to ask, how did you find out that you like Firefly?
That's a great question, actually.
Yeah.
Surprising. I actually have to think about it because it happened a long time ago. So back in the 90s, I had a friend who he was, okay, so it was at a rave, every Saturday night, there was a rave in Los Angeles, in Hollywood. And there was sort of a cage that could fit 4 people suspended above the dance floor. And he with his model good looks, and then with the other girls he pulled up out of the audience, or other go-go dancers in the club, they would do very light BDSM shows in the middle of the dance floor, in this cage above the dance floor. And one of the things that he used to do was fire play. So I don't know who taught him how to do it, but he and I met in a BDSM context, and we all just sort of started teaching each other stuff. And that was one of the things he taught me. And when I saw that, when done correctly and safely, how much absolute pleasure it brings the submissive or the bottom who's into this, it just became a normal part of my repertoire.
Okay.
But yeah, it's got to be done right. that's
definitely.
That's definitely. It's actually considered edge play because of it's an extreme advanced form of BDSM. It's edge play because the danger factor, rather than actually pushing someone's mental, emotional, or physical edge. The truth of the matter is, the fire, the way it's done when done properly, is it's a very brief sensation, and then you put the flame out. You don't let it sit there or anything like that. Nobody gets burned, nobody gets hurt, etc.
Okay. I mean, at this point, throwing fireballs, I mean, I feel like I should call you the Avatar instead of Arcane.
Yeah, right. He's got to learn waterbending first.
Okay. So I kind of want to reset for a second, and
sure,
because again, the ADHD brain's popping in. There are a couple terms that I've heard again and again. Of first of all, consent, and earlier we were talking about leadership and like commitment, submission, and things like that. Is that with, I guess, from the other side of the looking glass, when you explain to people that you're into BDSM, it's like, have you faced like judgment from that side, whether it be you, Arcane, or Daphne? Especially, I've seen it was like where some women will pretty much shame another woman for being a submissive.
Okay. Well, let's start with the BDSM, and I got a great story for you. Many moons ago, I was dating a girl. She was actually my first formal submissive. We met in Europe, and I trained her there under the supervision of other dominant submissive couples who we could debrief with them and try to keep me and her on a good path. We then moved back to America, and for a brief time, we moved into her parents' house. And her mother was a career nurse of 35 years, charming woman, great woman, really smart, fun conversations. And my partner, her daughter, she was into BDSM, but still kind of struggling with whether or not it was real for her, or whether or not it was just a trendy thing she had enjoyed trying out, and now she's moving on. And she really wanted to talk to her mom about it. And I turned to her and I said, listen, your mom and I get along really great. And I'm not sure, because her parents are very conservative. I said, I'm not sure they're going to roll with this. So please at least pick your words very carefully.
It's like, don't mess this up for me.
Yeah.
And so I went back to, I was in a different state, and I went back to the state that I was from briefly. And I came back, and her mom was just giving me these weird vibes. And so I walked into the bedroom with my girlfriend at the time, and I said, okay, what did you tell your mom? It was really obvious. And she's like, well, I just told her what we're doing and what we're into. So I decided I wanted to have my girlfriend's mother be at peace with this. And here's the analogy I came up with, and this is worth its weight in gold. And I recommend anybody trying to explain BDSM, feel free to steal this and use this, because it really conveys the point. everybody has had the experience of coming home from a long day of exhausting day of work. And you walk into the bathroom and you just want to take a long, hot bath. And you turn on the faucet and you turn on the cold faucet and you turn on the hot faucet, or you adjust the dial in between the two, and you hold your hand under the faucet until you feel that it's a really good temperature. It's going to be soothing. It's going to be relaxing. And you let the bathtub fill all the way up. And then you go to step into the bathtub. And that first step you take into the bathtub is intense, but you keep going into the bathtub because you want the intensity, because you know at the end of that bath, you're going to feel great. And so you immerse yourself into that intensity. And on a different day, maybe you'll want a little colder, maybe you'll want a little hotter. And that represents all the different ways you can play and all the different intensities at which you can play with BDSM. And if you look at BDSM like that hot bath, that really explains to a very large degree why people do it. And you can share that with most people, and people are completely vanilla and have never done BDSM a day in their life, and they're going to get it. And I shared that exact analogy with my girlfriend's mother, and it was wonderful to see this big, oh, okay, I kind of get it. And the story then goes on that she confessed to us about a week later that she had trouble sleeping one night because she couldn't decide whether or not to ask her husband, my girlfriend's father, if they wanted to try it. So,
Oh, wow.
so that was a success.
That's funny.
Oh, that's great.
Mhm. Yeah, and to be honest, I don't think I've ever been shamed, especially by another woman. And that's, I consider myself a feminist. And one of the things that I love about, working with Master Arcane is dispelling the myth that female submissives are weak, or they can't be feminists because they are putting themselves in a place of inequality to their partner. And I just think that because the term submissive is often viewed as weak, or giving up control, lacking in power, it just completely just misconstrues everything that it means to be a kinky submissive.
Yeah,
and
on the fetish side of the looking glass.
Yeah. And luckily today, however, I feel like feminism is in a really great place of looking at a woman's situation and saying like, hey, this woman chose this, that is her power. And that's exactly to me what kinky submission is I am not going to allow just anybody to take control over me. Absolutely not. I am going to pick out somebody who I trust, who I think has my best interests in heart, and I'm going to choose them to then submit to. And I don't, like I said, I don't submit to anybody else. I mean, I do have a boss, but that's it. You know what I mean? That's in a vanilla sense. But I don't consider myself weak or powerless. I am, in fact, empowered to stand up for myself, because I know that that's what Master Arcane would want me to do. He wants me to be respected and treated well, and damn it, I better act like it, and I better make sure that people are doing so.
And that's a very good point, is that at the Crow Academy, we try to teach people that DS and BDSM in a long-term format, like a DS relationship, should be empowering to both people. So the female, the submissive, a woman doing this into submission, should find herself feeling empowered. And it's not uncommon either. You hear stories actually of very powerful people, lawyers and judges and whatnot, who will step into the submissive role as a way to let go of the stress and the pressure, and they feel very cleansed by the process. You hear stories of women who maybe are in less than stellar job situations or life situations, who, when they step into their BDSM role, they literally get physically taller and more proud of just embracing their own nature, given that it is their actual nature to want to do this. And again, we're speaking exclusively of the fetish side of the looking glass.
Yeah, because this is something that we have chosen for ourselves. and this is somebody that we go to, that we trust and communicate with. And kind of circling back, because I realized I hadn't answered your what do I consider a submissive in the very beginning, is a submissive has to be someone who can stand up for themselves. They have to be able to communicate what is working for them and what is not. And oftentimes, if you do have a submissive who, let's say, does let anybody walk all over them, they're not going to have their voice heard. And therefore, that relationship at some point is going to crumble because resentment is going to build and they're not going to speak up about, the injustices that they feel is being done to them. And at some point, they are going to boil over, and that relationship is either not going to last, or it's going to head into some really rocky territory.
Or the submissive could implode, or
yes.
But I want to add that
Well,
yes, the submissive does have to speak up to convey what their needs are, what their limits are, what their goals and desires are, but it is still even expected inside the fetish side of the looking glass that it be done so respectfully and with etiquette. So it's not like
yes, that is important.
Suddenly like, oh, I don't like that, I don't want to do that anymore, fuck you. That does not work. Okay.
Right. Well, yeah.
What does work is for the submissive to step up and say, sir, I just want to convey to you that when you're using that toy in that way, that it didn't work for me, or when you said those certain words, it actually pulled me out of the scene. It didn't improve it for me. So we find, actually, and again, the Crow Academy being a high etiquette school, that when you stay inside the etiquette, there is literally no problem that cannot be confronted. It doesn't exist. You stay inside the etiquette and everybody's ears perk up because you both know you're respecting the foundation, this DS foundation, the kinky foundation.
Yeah. And so that's what I was going to say, is that, these two people really need to respect each other in order to continue doing what they do. And you'll find in a lot of DS relationships that there is great respect, because that's how you start the relationship off, is you negotiate what you want to do and what you don't want to do, and those limits are respected. And I have found that my DS relationship is easier to get over problems, because you go into it with this level of, okay, I'm not going to get anywhere by yelling and screaming. That is not something
there's
that
an extreme emphasis on good communication.
Yes, exactly. And so it is my job as a submissive to remain respectful to myself and to my master or dominant. And that if, so long as I am coming at this person with respect, I'm going to receive respect back. And that's just essentially one of the cornerstones of being a submissive is communication and being able to respect the person that you're with.
Yes, and I love that you both said it, because it's like growing up, something that my dad would always tell me is, just because I'd always ask him, it's like, oh, like, how have you been able to love mom for so long? And the first thing you told me is just like, oh, I was like, I don't love your mother. It's like, I'm in love with your mother, but beforehand, I respect her. It's like, yeah. I could not be in love with her if I did not respect her.
Exactly.
And it's like, it's that thing of respect where even on the vanilla side, it's just like for a relationship to work, it's like you have to have respect. And for you to say is that with having the DS foundation to it, plus the respect, it's like you have a framework of, okay, we're not going to be yelling in the middle of the street at each other just because we might be drunk and angry. It's just like there's always a level of decorum that has to happen for things to move forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to add also that for any listeners who might be wondering, like, okay, well, if you're all sitting there going respect all the time, what if someone's into humiliation or degradation, which are viable forms of play? People do that. There's people who find bottoms and submissives who find great joy if they are told to, like, for example, I have dominatrix friends who will tell a man to go on all fours so she can sit on his back. He becomes a piece of furniture, and this is fulfilling for him. He's getting off on this. There's people who literally verbal within the course of a scene, key point there, in the course of a scene during a session when they're playing, the dominant might start speaking very harshly and very mean and antagonistically. And for some bottoms and submissive, that floats their boat. I have a dominatrix friend who came to visit me. She's from England, and she brought her extremely intelligent, well-spoken male submissive with her. And we all went out to a BDSM club, and she proceeded to do this humiliation scene on him publicly that was astounding. Her presence alone was astounding, but the way she was just tearing this guy down publicly, and you could just see the grin on his face getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And of course, she was hanging out with her friends. The next day we're driving around. I asked her, I asked him, can you explain to me what it is? And he said, literally, the more people who see him being humiliated, the more he gets off on it. He gets a rush. He gets an emotional orgasm, if you will. And this floats his boat to such an enormous degree that's why he loved being with his dominatrix. So it's not that you can't take it there in the course of play with a mutually negotiated kind of play where both people are enjoying their side of it. You can absolutely go there. I would say, I tell people, before you jump into something like humiliation or degradation play, understand that it can be trickier because you're now in the world of the mind. You're not just using a flogger, that it can be trickier than, it can be one of the trickiest toys, quote unquote, that you could possibly use. So it's not really for beginners. If you're going to try it, start off very, very light. I had a slave years ago who long-term, we got along great, everything. But when it came to this form of play, if I told her to suddenly behave like a certain animal, she could do it without thinking twice about it. Didn't matter what the animal was. I could say, I want you to be a spider and walk around the room. And she'd get down on all fours and kind of crawl over furniture and stuff, totally get into it. At the same time, ironically, and just to understand how unique every single person is in the world of BDSM and how you really have to find out what works for you in particular, I could tell her, I want you to act like one of our friends, and she'd freeze up. That was too far for her. That was her personal limit. Asking her to be something fictitious like a character or a creature, no problem. Asking her to be like an actual person, she explained to me later on after the fact that she felt, even if the person wasn't there, she felt like doing so would inherently be so disrespectful to that person, her imitation of them, that it made her feel bad. And so she just didn't want to go there, which is fine. I didn't press the point at all. I never again asked her to be somebody that we actually know. So it's very, very tricky stuff when you're getting into those kinds of humiliation or degradation or depersonalization games.
Yep.
And I feel like with that, it takes a lot of introspection, because you need to know yourself and know your soft limits and your hard limits. It's like, what are the things that are like negotiable? And then what are the things that it's like, absolutely, like, I don't care how good a scene is going. If you do that, then that's the end of the scene.
Yeah, you need to know your
that's fair.
triggers as well. Definitely. If you have any sort of trauma, you need to know, like, okay, what could potentially trigger this? And because it's vitally important that both you and your partner know what those are.
Yeah. And also negotiation, there's the initial negotiation, which is probably the most important one when you're first meeting someone and you're just generally talking about what you're into and what they're into. And then there's negotiations that can happen along the way. So as I was saying, we debrief after almost every single time we play. And if she repeatedly tells me that, let's just say there's a certain way that, I tie her hands once in a blue moon, but every time I do it, it somehow distracts her from the scene, or it's not as comfortable if I do that, then turn her a certain way. Eventually I will just make a note that is something that we should probably take out of our play. So there's a little negotiations that can happen along the way. Let's say both of you've been together for a couple of years, and all of a sudden you're in some club in a foreign city, and you see somebody doing something, and one person's like, huh, I never thought of that before. And the other person has a look of terror on their face. That's a little bit of a negotiation right there. One person's like, I'd like to try that. And the other person's like, I'd really rather we never, ever do that. You know?
Like,
Yeah.
I don't even want to see that again.
Yeah.
It doesn't tend to be that bad, but like, for example,
Yeah.
you know, back to fire play, I was in a club years ago, and this person was doing something with fire play that was, first of all, the reality of being able to do the scene that he did, you needed a lot of open space. And I saw him do it, and I turned to my partner and I said, what do you think of that? He was basically making a teeny little homemade flamethrower. So aside from the safety concerns of that alone,
Mhm.
it wasn't a big flame, but it was just, my brain even said like, wow, that is a lot of fire to control. That, you know, just like, I'm like, there's so many things could go wrong there. I grew up in the day and age of, I think it was in the 90s. There's a club in New England where they had one little flame that lit all the Velvet Curtains on fire. It was a hard rock band. I want to say Whitesnake, but it wasn't Whitesnake. Anyhow, and so the idea of fire safety is emblazoned, no pun intended, upon my mind. And so, yeah, I saw this guy doing this trick, fire play trick, and I was like, it looks super cool. And I kind of turned to my partner, and she's like, yeah, I don't think I want to go. She liked my style with little teeny flames, you know. And that's that right there. That was like a little mini instantaneous negotiation.
Okay, that's great, because with that I feel like, especially someone who's new that's getting into it, is that understanding the formal negotiations where you kind of sit down with someone and it's just like, okay, like, what's on the table, what's off the table, what's kind of on the table. And then, like you said, the subtle ones where you might look at your partner and it's just like, oh, okay. It's like, I'm like, I know you well enough that this is not okay. So I don't even really need to ask at this point because of your body language.
Yeah, body language, or literally a 2-sentence conversation. You know, what do you think? Nah, I'd rather not. And that's it. You know, if you're
duly noted.
Yeah, duly noted.
Cross that
like
off.
Yeah. And that includes things like consensual non-consent, which is where if the two people are in a consensual non-consent situation or scene or something like that, the dominant has the right to pull out things that are, maybe that specific thing wasn't discussed, but it still falls under the umbrella of what was covered back in the initial negotiation. And if you're going to modify the initial negotiation, which is the most important one, you really need to have a normal sit-down discussion about it. A great example, by the way, is you know, one of the things we tell people they really have to iron out in the initial negotiation is whether or not the relationship is going to be monogamous or polyamorous.
Oh, big time.
If it's going to be monogamous and both people agree to monogamy, and let's say they've been together for years and years, and all of a sudden they're like, you know what, let's spice things up a little bit by bringing in a third or something like that. That needs to be a full sit-down negotiation, and people could have very strong feelings about it. And you both got to be able to walk away from it saying like, yeah, we're not going to change things because it isn't working for both of us. You know what I mean?
Yes.
One person can't suddenly decide, oh, the dominant can't. Well, I've seen this happen where dominants make this mistake. Well-meaning dominants, where they're like, well, you know, because we're in a consensual, non-consent, 24/7 DS relationship, I've just decided that even though I've been together for 3 years, a monogamous couple, I'm going to bring in a third. Well, that is the key point here, is that polyamory or monogamy is such a deep and personal thing for people that you cannot just spring it on somebody. If someone said, you know, we've been together 3 years and I know you love bondage and being tied up in all kinds of situations, so for the first time this week, we're going to go into the you know, the backwoods of my property, and I'm actually going to do some outdoor bondage on you. That's still pretty much within the initial negotiation. You know, that's just like changing the furniture. But when it gets to a deep issues, you cannot change those things without a very solid renegotiation.
And
Mhm.
could you explain just a little bit about, you said consensual non-consent?
Yeah, consensual non-consent just means that at some point the submissive or bottom has agreed that they will do things or allow behaviors that they may not have thought of right in the beginning, but provided it does not cross any of their hard limits, that it will be considered permission granted. So, for example, if somebody is into heavy paddling, let's say, and they're in a C, it's this abbreviation is CNC. They've given CNC to the dominant, and so the dominant might pull out a cane, which is a different sensation than a paddle, and he might start using the cane roughly in the same area, roughly in the same way in general, and the bottom might still signal, hey, that's getting pretty intense. But the permission for the dominant to pull out the cane, even though canes were not specifically discussed, that falls under the CNC. If it gets, like I said, as long as it's not crossing any hard limits, and I'm glad you brought up soft limits, by the way. Soft limits are really important to understand in the world of BDSM. A soft limit just means I'm not into it today, but after we build trust and maybe try some lighter sensations, I might try it down the road.
And just going back to CNC, would you consider this like a good example? So when I think of CNC, like I think of, between Master Arcane and myself, we've agreed that I'm going to do the chores in the house.
I knew you were going to say
that. And so,
that.
there are times where I'm like, oh, I really don't want to do the dishes, right? But part of CNC means Master Arcane has every right to come into my room and go, hey, can you go do the dishes? And I cannot be like, no, I don't feel like doing them right now. You know what I mean? I have agreed that, like, even if I really don't want to do the dishes, I still have to do them. That is something that we've agreed upon.
DS relationship, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
That we did, and the reason that would be it fall into the CNC is because we did agree in our initial negotiation and in the renegotiations when we decided to go from being a dominant submissive couple to master and slave. When we made that advancement forward and climbed further up that ladder, we discussed the fact, I made it very clear. I said, as my slave, I will want you to be taking care of the house in general. I will, whatever, fill in the blank, provide the groceries or pay for all the bills or something like that. And, as your part, I want you to be keeping my environment clean. As my slave, you'll keep the master's home clean. And, she had the right to say, oh, I hate chores as a deal breaker for me, but she didn't. She said, okay, I can do that. So the fact that it might specifically be the dishes that need to be cleaned up falls under that larger CNC of her agreed and understanding that accepting me as her master would mean something like that, possibly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it doesn't cross.
Now I need to ask, do you ever do dishes?
Do I ever do dishes?
Yeah. Do you do dishes sometimes?
I read about it in books. No.
I know it involves water.
The funny thing is that I actually am probably have a pretty high standard of cleanliness myself. And I was raised to be able to do everything by myself, to cook, clean, sew. Yes, I can hem my own pants, etc. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so if she's asleep, I'm not going to wake her up to do the dishes. The exception being is that I said, honey, please do the dishes. And 4 hours goes by and I'm like, don't forget to do the dishes. And then she goes to bed. then I might wake her up and be like, you forgot to do the dishes. But
yeah.
But as a rule, yes, I have cleaned my own stuff. Yes, I actually there's a funny, the opposite of that is that my previous very long-term submissive not only did all the cooking and all the laundry and everything. I mean, none of us ever forget how to use a vacuum cleaner, but I literally didn't know how to use my own laundry machine. I didn't know how to use my own washer and dryer. It was all Greek to me. So even after she and I parted ways, I had to call her up and be like, "Hey, how does my washing machine work? Would you mind coming over here and showing me how to do my own laundry?" And that actually kind of is a good lesson for dominants out there: is don't ever let yourself get to the point where some fundamental basic part of life, you have let the submissive do it so much that you literally have forgotten how to do it. That to me is a bit silly and going too far. So I let that happen one time with that one submissive, and otherwise, yes, I can take care of my own stuff if I need to.
Yeah, and I do want to point out that Master Arcane is very respectful of the fact that I have agreed to do all the chores and all the cooking. I don't think I've ever seen him, sitting at his computer desk, eating a fig bar and then just throw the wrapper on the ground. You know what I mean? There's never that level of like, oh, well, I know she's here to pick up after me, and he always
that's the
asks.
respect.
Thank you,
Yes,
thank
exactly.
you, Daphne, for supporting me, telling everybody I'm not a slob. I appreciate that.
But you know what I'm saying? Like I feel respected that you don't just expect me to clean up after you. Like he will clean up after himself, and so that feels nice to be like, oh, okay, like I feel respected, and
I had the opposite happen. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, well, hold on. I was just gonna say, and that he's always saying, "Hey, honey, can you please do the dishes? Hey, honey, could you please?" You know what I mean? And I appreciate you cleaning the house. Thank you. He's very. It makes me feel appreciated, which makes me more than happy to keep doing it. So.
And there's a good note there also, which is that, again, the Crow Academy being very heavily into etiquette. Because we're so into etiquette, I also like to teach new doms that it is not only good to say please, thank you, and you're welcome, but you're also teaching that etiquette to the submissive with the intent of having them copy that. So I want my submissive to say thank you and please and you're welcome, and therefore I use it myself in my ordinary speech.
That's very nice.
No downside to it.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say there's a funny story that I actually that same former long-term slave, she had what could only be described as a cleaning fetish, almost on the order of OCD, but not quite. And she would clean my home so thoroughly, she'd make it hospital sterile. But the problem is that she would have this furrowed brow. I didn't ask her to do this. She would do it all on her own. And she just looked stressed all the time. And I was more bothered by how much she was stressing herself out than whether or not my home smelled hospital sterile. So I literally had to make a rule with her. And I said, listen, you are here henceforth, you are only allowed to clean the house to hospital sterile once a month. And the rest of the time, if you're cleaning, visually clean is good enough. And I would like you to stop there to lighten your load that you are placing upon yourself that I did not place on you. Mm-hmm. I did not tell you need to make this place smell like a hospital. So that was just, sometimes
not every day you need to clean the blades on the
on
the fan.
God. It was you would think it'd be wonderful, but it got out of control, and seeing her discomfort level was more of an issue for me. I wanted her to just be happier and relax about it a little more.
Yes.
And the place was still spotless.
That level of caring of like the dom has to have is this. It's like when you see yourself distressed or something like that, it's just like it's a responsibility to try to fix it. Is that accurate?
Yeah, you've got to, here's something else that we teach is that no matter how deeply you get into the dominant or submissive role, no matter how hardcore a bottom or a top or a switch or an edge player you are, at the end of the day, you're still two natural human beings, and with normal human needs and normal human desires and all the things that whether you want to accept it or reject it, we all know it's part of just the normal human condition. And so when your DS starts to interfere with people being normal, natural people and pushing them into weird directions where they're making themselves uncomfortable or making other people uncomfortable, then it's a good time to remember to just ground yourself, help ground your, if you're the dominant, help ground your partner, or vice versa. The submissive can step up and help ground the dominant if the dominant's getting too far, way out into left field. And just, keep it realistic, keep it grounded, keep it realistic. It comes back to, like, even the most hardcore dominant submissive relationship is going to do a lot better when you have normal everyday compatibility and normal everyday life functions smoothly, etc.
Okay. Yes. And I guess that's the thing, is like, with like you said, is like grounding yourself is just like, this is something that we have both agreed to do and engage in. But at the end of the day, it's just like, it's like,
we can't deny our own
like
human
normal
nature.
people, like it's just normal, like normal people that have agreed to do something amongst themselves.
Yeah,
And
the power exchange, or the power flow, I should say, has been negotiated. You've established who's in control. You've established who's to obey. You've established who commands, who receives the command. And a lot of things we teach new dominant submissive couples is that really think of it as the dominant is the one who gets one extra vote, and they get 51% of the decision. So it's not that they have to be overwhelmingly, if I say it and think it, then it is law, because on some level, the submissive has to agree to that. There are dominant submissive couples where literally whatever the dominant says is what the submissive does, but during their initial negotiation, they would have negotiated that the submissive or the bottom wants that. They desire to have that level of command. Personally, for me, I want my submissive to be this very vibrant human being with lots of desires and needs and fun things that they want to do. And, in a certain sense, that to me was a complete win, because then Daphne comes back around with stuff that she's interested in doing and stuff that she wants to see and places she wants to go and hobbies and whatnot that weren't part of my repertoire. And I get exposed to them because she's into it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like one hand washes the other. It's just like, it's the best way I can describe it. I'm not even going to try to make a metaphor else. One hand washes the other.
You know what? It's like one hand washes the other, but you're still either right-handed or left-handed. And whichever is the dominant hand, that one's going to get 51% of the vote.
Yes.
That's fair.
Mixing metaphors intensely here.
Yes. So I'm not going to keep you too long. I just have a couple more questions.
Yeah, no worries.
So in your opinion, what are some qualities or some protocols or etiquette in a DS relationship that people that have more vanilla relationships could adopt that would be beneficial?
Oh, that's easy. There's I gave a speech on this actually at a philosophy convention of all places, where I pointed out that non-kinky vanilla couples could really benefit by learning from some of the stuff that we in the kink community do. For example, extreme emphasis on good verbal, open mouth, move jaw, engage vocal cords, engage tongue communication. Don't assume things, don't brush things under the carpet. Talk about stuff, tell your feelings, share your needs, share your desires, things like limits, what you're into, what you're not into. Even if it's completely vanilla, it's good to talk about in a non-hostile, non-confrontational manner. Hey, you know what? Since we are going to move in together in this new apartment, I want you to know that I always take off my shoes at the door, and I really like the way that makes my apartment feel. Would you mind doing that? Oh, no, I can't do that. I'd never take off my shoes ever because I sleep in them or whatever. That's not.
Or I squeeze the toothpaste from the middle, not from the bottom. So.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But the point is, the important thing is the discussion, talking about it, making sure you're on the same page. And in a world now, the world in 2023 is that even if you want, and you're on a first date and you go to lean in for a kiss, it's now quite the norm to say, I'd really like to kiss you. I'd really like to, and wait for the other person to give some kind of consent. That kind of communication, that kind of wanting to be on the same page as the other person is something that we in the BDSM world do every single day and have been doing it for decades and decades. And it is great if the vanilla world wants to step up and make this their norm as well. I fully support that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that is a big one that I think that the vanilla world could adopt. Another one is, and it's so funny, because now that me and my girlfriends are getting in our 30s, the dating scene. I mean, I've been with Master Arcane for a while, but my girlfriends who are single, they're like, "Oh my gosh, dating in your 30s is just a whole new world."
It's
Like, and so
trash.
I'm and so I'm constantly giving them advice, like, "All right," and I'm thinking to myself, "Wow, this could have been resolved if this could have been resolved this way, and if they would just be open and honest with each other from the beginning." So I guess this kind of dovetails into communication as well, but this is very specifically that when two people get together to potentially form a DS relationship, they are typically very open about what they expect, what they need, what they want, and what they are looking for in the foreseeable future. So things like, are you monogamous? Are you polyamorous? Do you want children? Are you looking for a long-term partner? These are things that are just out in the open right there. Whereas, if you're in the vanilla dating scene, those things might eventually come around to being talked about. What happens, and this has happened to a couple of my girlfriends, where they don't want children and they didn't realize that their partner wanted children. And so 5 months down the road, they're emotionally invested. And the guy says, like, I think I would want like 2 kids. And, the relationship comes to a screeching halt. She goes, "What do you mean?" "Yeah, I want to be a dad." And she goes, I don't want kids. You know what I mean? And that
Yeah.
becomes a point of contention, and just sparks
You're
fly,
supposed to
and it's not
destroy the
good.
Sith, not join them.
Yeah, right. And so I trusted you. You were the chosen one. Yes, sir. Anyway. Um, so that is one thing that I think the vanilla world could really do with is just being very upfront and open about what your expectations are, and what you want out of life just from the get-go. Just have it all out there.
And I
Yeah.
think with that is that it's especially in the vanilla sense of dating, is that people have been conditioned into it's a game. And it's
Yes.
like
Ugh.
who makes the first move is like, oh, I'm not gonna, it's like I want to text him, but I'm not gonna text him because if I do,
Hmm.
then it's just like, nah, if you think about
Oh
somebody,
yeah.
fucking text him.
Then
Like
I'm going to appear desperate, or he's
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
get, yeah, I'm going to freak him out if I appear like I want him to. Oh my God. Yeah.
That's
That
one
was
of the
dating in my
reasons
20s. That was
that was one of the
awful.
reasons that many moons ago I just literally decided I'm not dating vanilla anymore. I couldn't be bothered with all the vanilla stuff like that. I said I'm just going to go find somebody who is into, I don't think I had the word BDSM back then, but who's into the stuff I'm into, and start there. And that kind of immediately led into a world of this, for lack of a better term, I'm just going to say superior communication.
Yeah. And
Communication.
it is superior because
yeah.
a lot of people in the vanilla community is like are I'm not trying to get kicked off of YouTube, so I can't use that word. They are regressed in their communication skills, almost to the point of high school people.
Yes. Oh
A
yeah.
lot
Yeah.
of arrested
Surprisingly.
adolescents. That's the best way I can describe it.
Yeah. Oh
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Well, that
and
also
this
has a lot
whole,
to do with role models too, and what they are learning from their role models and their older peers and whatnot. And yeah, that's definitely why it'd be nice to see BDSM and the techniques we use to get past all that stuff become the new role models for them.
yeah, definitely. Well, and I think to just get past this whole concept of romance is a mystery is sexy, like no, it's not. I want to know exactly what I'm getting into. Like a little bit of mystery is fine, but like I want to know who it is that I'm meeting. I want to know exactly what they want out of life, and if our visions of what we want align. I'm not here to waste time. You know what I mean? And so that's the really nice thing about dating in the DS world, is that that's usually just out for everybody to see.
Yeah, right up front. One of my favorite things about the BDSM community, my very, 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 very first public fetish club was in Amsterdam. And in this club, which I would go to regularly, you had every walk of life. You had people living in a squat, which is an abandoned building that they've managed to convert into a livable space. You had people who were TV producers. You had IT people, actors. You had just everybody. And the funniest thing, funny is a strong word, but funny, great thing is that you'd walk into this club full of these people. And of course, if you're a regular there, you eventually know almost everybody in the club. And you realize that which people tend to keep the most secret, which is their sexuality, was the first thing you know about these people. Their sexuality was on their sleeve. You're looking at it, it's right there, it's surrounded by it. And thereafter, every other aspect of conversation was super easy and a downhill ride. There was this whole vibe of like, we got nothing to hide. Here I am. You see exactly what I am and what I'm into. So
Yeah.
all the rest is downhill. Yes, I also have 3 cats and a dog named Harry, you know. It's just really easy going. And that's just one of the lovely things that I found about the BDSM world.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
Yeah.
that one thing you just get off the table and it's just like, okay, it's like we ate the kale. It's like,
Yeah.
it was like, now we can get the other stuff.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly.
Okay, my last 2 questions. One, at this point, I think we need to just make this like a dictionary type of episode, because so many terms were just well, you're just defining. Could you define aftercare and the concept of like headspace, like being in that like a dominant headspace, submissive headspace?
Yeah. Daphne, you want to start? Like define those 2 terms as a submissive, and then I'll define them as a dominant.
Yeah, sure. So aftercare basically just means it is a time period after a scene wherein the bottom or the top needs time to sort of readjust and kind of come back to reality. And this can happen for a couple of reasons. For the bottom, when you're using a lot of toys and the intensity is going up, your body will start releasing endorphins, and you can actually get a high on those endorphins. And so to expect somebody to come off the BDSM furniture and be able to walk around, no big deal, directly after a really heavy intensity scene it's just not, it's not realistic. However, there are some people who can do that. There are some people who say, I don't need any aftercare, I'm good. You know what I mean? But that is negotiated. And unless somebody says, I don't need any aftercare, you should always assume to do aftercare. And that can look different to different people. For me personally, I usually just need to kind of sit down, get a drink of water, and to just be off my feet for a little bit. And typically within about 10 minutes, I'm usually good to go again. There are some people who what it just depends on what they're working through in the scene, and if it's really challenging, they might need just time alone, a soft blanket, some water, and to just not be disturbed for a while. And there are some dominants and some tops that after a scene they want to know that they haven't done anything to offend the submissive, I should say. And this is me just guessing. So, Master, if you feel like I'm saying anything that's not correct, please correct me. But I feel like I have run into a couple of tops slash dominants that have done a scene that is so really intense, and they just want to know that what they have done is still good. You know what I mean? So aftercare to them could be like, submissive hugging them and being like, oh, I had such a great time. That was such a great scene. Thank you so much. Stuff like that. They want to know that they're still appreciated, so to speak. Does that sound?
Yeah, that I would agree with everything you said. I would add that water, giving the submissive or the bottom water right after a scene is probably one of the single greatest things you can possibly do, because people
Yes.
don't realize that for whatever reason, which actually physiologically I still don't quite understand it, but BDSM is really dehydrating. So giving the submissive water, it also helps flush the endorphins out of the bloodstream, which your body's working overtime to do that anyway, but it helps a lot. Helps a person get their feet back on the ground. Standing by them, making sure, reading their body language, making sure that they look as though they can handle themselves, watching their activity. Maybe they just need to cuddle or have a quiet place. Maybe they just immediately want to go grab a blanket and watch TV. Maybe they are immediately conversational. I think Daphne and I even did a public scene one time, and pretty soon after the scene, she was being fully social. I still got her the glass of water anyhow, but she was just really happy and excited to engage with other people and talk to them and have good conversations. So it can vary. There's not necessarily a set way that it is for every person. Every person can be very different too. Some people, it doesn't take much to have their body really release a lot of endorphins, and other people can do these really, really intense scenes. And as soon as the scene's done, they're like, cool, I'm going to go get a bite to eat.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about your submissive headspace?
Oh,
well,
no, yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, submissive headspace. Like, I just want to kind of clarify on the question, like, what is it like to be in a submissive headspace, or just what is a submissive headspace to begin with?
We can do both.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I would say a submissive headspace for me is a mode I go into when I really need to be on top of my own behavior and on top of being obedient and just being well behaved. Where I need to make sure that I'm being respectful and I'm doing as Master asks. Because there are times where I can get a little excited and kind of get ahead of myself. And so sometimes Master will have to say, like, all right, we're getting a little off track here, like, and either he will have me go into a slave position, and that will actually help me get into a headspace, or he will say a safe word that we've negotiated to mean, I need you to be in a submissive headspace now. And so it is a level of self awareness that is heightened higher than any other time. And during a scene, it kind of changes where I am really sort of enjoying the sensation of the toys, and I'm making sure, checking in within my body, making sure that everything is good, that this isn't too intense for me. And there are times actually where, I want it to be a little more intense because there's maybe a cathartic place that I'm trying to get to. And so, but above, at all times where I'm in my submissive headspace, I have to make sure that I am communicative enough to where if anything goes wrong, I can, give a hand signal.
Or equally, if you want the scene's intensity to go up and down, you can give a hand signal. That's still part of it.
Exactly. Yes. And so regardless of the headspace that I'm in, I always need to be, self-aware. So I think that's really important for a submissive headspace, is to just check in with yourself and to be able to communicate outward.
And then I was going to add to that she mentioned slave positions, and what a slave position is. It varies from BDSM school to BDSM school, but they're particular physical postures that a submissive or a slave can learn that some people associate it with a word. I use a number. So I'll call out a number, or I'll say position and then a number. And Daphne knows to literally, for example, kneel down on the ground with her back really nice and straight and her chin up and her eyes downcast and her hands on top of her thighs as she waits for the next instruction. And it's surprisingly wonderful how much the physical anchor of a slave position can help a submissive get into their headspace really fast, really fast.
Yeah, like especially if I'm coming home like after work and I'm just not at all like thinking about my role as a submissive. So if I get home and I'm kind of like upset because maybe my boss pissed me off or had a horrible customer, whatever, right? And I start to get kind of grumpy and maybe a little bit short. Master Arcane can say, Daphne, position 3, and that's the position he described where I kneel down and have my back straight and really good posture. And that actually helps me be like, oh, yeah, I'm not at work anymore. I am home. I need to be in my submissive space. And so it's just a really quick and easy way for me to just be there.
And also the headspace of both the dominant and the submissive. I'll talk about the dominant one in a minute, but there's a headspace for a submissive. Depending on the couple, there can be a negotiated degree to which the submissive is expected to maintain etiquette or maintain decorum, whether or not they're in the mood or not. That could be under consensual non-consent, that even if you're in a bad mood, you still, use these forms of address respectfully, something like that. That's again back to where the etiquette can actually solve a lot of issues, make all issues very easy to discuss. For some people, that might be a very, very constant thing. At the Crow Academy, we actually differentiated what we feel are the 6 most important levels, if you will, of adhering to the submissive daily headspace, ranging from if we're out to dinner with her parents, she might not overtly engage in certain protocols that we normally do inside the house, but it doesn't mean she's out of role. She's still 24/7 submissive, 24/7 slave, and she's able to maintain that no problem at all. But we allow in that lightest level for her to set stuff aside because of the circumstances. At the extreme opposite end, you've got when we're actually in the playroom, I'm training her. It's very, very specifically BDSM and nothing else. Everything else is obscure and outside of the room and has nothing to do with what we're doing. The whole world can wait, if you want to think of it that way. And that's the highest level, where there's enormous decorum and physical positioning and good posture and exactly where her eyes are looking and exactly the forms of address that she uses. And that's the complete opposite. And there's 4 levels in between those 2 extremes.
Okay.
Yeah. And then as far as the dominant headspace goes, what I can really tell you and what we try to teach is that it is people often say, like, look, you're the dominant. You're the one doing all the work. You're swinging all the whips. You're tying all the knots. Does it ever get exhausting? Do you ever feel like it's work? And my answer for that is that when I am in the middle of a scene and I'm flogging Daphne or tying her to the furniture or something like that, it's exactly what I just described. The rest of the world goes away. I go into what I call the dominant trance, if you will, where Daphne becomes the absolute focus and center of my world to all other exceptions. That scene is all that matters. And I love being in that level of focus. It's like a meditation. It's like a form of, what would you call it? Like a
Mantra?
A living guided visualization, being guided by myself, where I'm so completely there. Yeah, kind of, you could call it a mantra if you in a certain sense, that it's the absolute focus of my mind. And I love going there. And then, like I said, when I'm using all the different toys and tools, I feel like I am painting with sensation. And Daphne is the canvas.
And with the scenes, it doesn't always lead to sexual intercourse. Sometimes it's just purely sensual, correct?
Yes, correct.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wanted to
think,
clarify that for people, because if they think
oh,
like every scene has to lead to sex, it was like, no, it doesn't.
no.
But
Well,
I
and
will also add,
that's,
I want to add actually that at the same time, BDSM, one of my favorite things about it, and the reason I completely invested in this world of BDSM is because a great BDSM scene, great bondage scene, all these things can also be looked at as really, really wonderful extended foreplay. So if it is
yeah.
going to go sexual, so much more is happening before the sexual encounter. And it's like having a plain bowl of rice and suddenly someone hands you all the spices in the world.
Yeah, but I do think it's important that people understand that just because you are doing a BDSM scene with someone does not equate to consent for sex.
Yeah,
You do
good point.
have play partners, which mean people that have decided to and negotiated a scene together. They could be completely platonic, and sex never be on the table whatsoever. However, I would also like to add that that everyone, like, before a BDSM scene, it does need to be discussed, like, if there's going to be any sort of sexual touching of any kind beforehand, because in the midst of a scene, someone can, kind of get their blood going and say like, hey, especially the bottom, like, hey, this is kind of turning me on, right? And I think it's important for tops and doms to know, like, that is not a good time. Mid scene is not a good time to negotiate sex. That should be something discussed beforehand, unless the bottom has stated, I'm not sure yet. And then, if they decide midway that, like, yeah, let's do this, then sure. But if they say in the beginning, I don't want this to be sexual, I just want it to be purely platonic, then it needs to sort of stay that way, just because a high level of
Well,
endorphins can make somebody agree to something that they might,
Yeah, kind
afterwards
of
not
like
yeah,
act out of character. Yeah.
yeah,
well, the most important thing is what you said was, uh, negotiate beforehand what the scene's going to be about.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, 100%. Mhm.
Okay, here's my last question. Well, it's like more so of the outro. Um, what advice? I mean, you guys have given so much, so I feel like it's kind of a redundant question, but what is the advice you would give to people that are thinking about getting into the BDSM world, and then or like new into it, and then after that, it's like, where can people contact you, find more content, find more lessons, teachings?
Yeah, no problem. Well, first of all, crowacademy.com is the main portal. That's where people should get started with Crow Academy. We have a completely separate website that is linked from the main navigation panel at crowacademy.com. And that other website is called arcaneadvice.com. And Arcane Advice is really a library of free lessons. It's always free. It's always going to be free. And it deals with domination, submission, gear, relationships, negotiation. We have all these different categories that people can go there and read dozens and dozens of lessons about all of these separate topics. I do have, we have our first book out. It's called Igniting the Fire, The Art of Romantic Submission. And it's a beautiful book, if I may say so. It's got artwork on every single page. The two famous fetish photographers, Ken Marcus and Perry Gallagher, did all the photographs in the book. There's like 200 plus photographs in the book, a lot of which are actually to illustrate the points that are being taught. It's basically an A through Z guide on how to build a successful dominant submissive relationship. It's available on Amazon, and the ebook version is available on Barnes and Noble, as well as on the Crow Academy website in the store on our website. Otherwise, we can also recommend FetLife. And FetLife It's massive. There's 8 million members there. And to give you an idea of the caliber of people you'll find there, that's fetlife.com, FETLIFE.com. The kind of people you find on FetLife, prior to 50 Shades of Grey, there was 2 million members. After 50 Shades of Grey, it shot up to 5 million members. So again, 50 Shades got the conversation going, but it also kind of got people, a lot of people, very misinformed and thinking that, oh, I'm going to go do this now, so I'm going to go jump on FetLife. The trick to FetLife is to join groups that seem to share your interest. And if you find the group is full of people who turn you off, leave the group. Don't stay in a group that is full of nasty, immature people, which you will find on FetLife. You'll also find groups with really knowledgeable, great people who are really there to help answer questions. They actually take pleasure teaching people how to enjoy BDSM properly. In FetLife also, at the very top is a tab called Places, Places. And when you click there, you can then look up your country, your state, and even your city and get a full listing of all the activities going on in your area. So then you can go to a munch or go to an event or go to a class. And equally, if you belong to a group that you're having a good time in and you enjoy the group and the subjects there, let's say you're part of a beginner's bondage group, then you can say, hey, I live in a certain city. Does anybody know of any bondage classes happening out here? On Facebook also, we have a Facebook page. You can just look up the Crow Academy on Facebook. We also have a discussion group, highly moderated, about 800 people in a small discussion group, about 800 people. And we keep things very clear and very, very educational there. One thing I should mention is if you are brand new to BDSM, and especially if you're a female submissive, you will encounter people on FetLife, for example, who will say, oh, I am here to mentor you, mentor. The word mentor somebody, or the word to be a protector of somebody, literally means a hands-off position. So if somebody says, I'm happy to mentor you in BDSM or happy to be your protector in BDSM, understand that they have just made a commitment to not pursue you sexually. People have misused those terms. People have said, oh, I'm here to mentor you. And the next thing you know, that's the first thing they do is hit on the person. So just be aware, on FetLife, there's good resources there. Not everybody there is an angel, that's for sure.
Thank you.
And what else? What are some great books, babe, that we've read that there was a book, another book that's pretty good is called Screw the Roses, Send Me the Thorns. That one's also pretty easy to get on Amazon. It's about 75% on the mark. It has a lot of good advice in it. It gets a little opinionated sometimes, but not bad. There was one. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I mean, a person that comes to mind, but I don't think she has a book out. But she is a YouTuber and her name's Evie Lupine, and she's a great BDSM educator, I think. So yeah. I would recommend her.
What was her name?
I'm sorry. Evie Lupine.
Okay.
Evie, like the Pokemon. But yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. If you go to the Crow Academy YouTube channel, which is also completely free, a bunch of videos on there. We have a series called 5-Minute BDSM, which is very important points discussed very succinctly. On that page, you can also find a link to Evie Lupine's page.
Yeah, she's really great. And then, sorry, you were thinking of a book?
I was going to mention Sensuous Magic by Pat Califia, written a long time ago. And what the authoress did is she really gave a little brief taste of many, many, many kinds of fetish. And she did so, for the most part, 95% on the mark, very tastefully, very fair, and very reasonable. So I like that book a lot too. What else? There's all kinds of fiction out there, a lot better than 50 Shades.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So those are good. If you're going to try online dating, like I said, use the 3 rules and have fun with it. Don't get super deeply attached when you're trying online dating. It should be the kind of thing you do in the morning or in the evening as you're having a coffee or something like that. When you're relaxed, don't get too hung up on it. And like Daphne said, if you can actually become part of a local BDSM community, make friends. Start off by making friends. Don't go in there immediately deciding that you're there to hook up with somebody. That I think is a bit more of a mistake. Go there and make friends, because one day that friend who now knows you and has talked to you and can vouch for you might know somebody else, and then they can set you up with that person, and then both you're sort of pre-vetted in that regard.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
And remember one thing else: there's no upper limit. Okay, I've been doing this for more than 3 decades live as an adult, and like I said, it goes all the way back to my childhood. I'm still learning. There's no mountain peak to get to where you're done learning about BDSM. It is vast. It's amazing. There's always something new to learn, always something new to try, and we recommend people embrace that attitude that we're all permanent students in this.
Thank you. And Daphne, do you have any final thoughts?
We just, safety and consent are key. And again, if you are looking for somebody to do this with, do so not in a frenzied manner. Take those baby steps. Even if you're really excited and want to jump into the deep end of the pool, just go from the shallow and then work your way to the deep end. And again, just really properly vet that person that you're going to do this with. And I think that communication also, if you are a submissive, is something that you really need to be on top of, whether that's in the middle of a scene, whether that's in the negotiation of telling the other person what your limits are. It's just consent, safety, and communication are key.
Yep. And also be honest, represent yourself accurately.
Yeah.
If you're a beginner, let people know you're a beginner. If you have a ton of experience, you can talk about what you're really good at, and be yourself above all. If you're exploring it and you find that there are things that appeal to all, like I said, all your friends, and it's not your thing, that's fine. There's so many different ways you can explore this. So it's really, you really have a chance to explore who you are. What is your personal, real idiosyncrasies and proclivities.
Yep. Be yourself.
And don't try fire play at home, guys.
Yeah.
Nope, definitely not.
Yeah.
Not without full and complete training.
Yeah.
Well, I want to say again, thank you to the both of you for agreeing to come on. This has been a great conversation, very educational, and just eye-opening. And I hope that some people that are listening right now that have been thinking about it or are in it and don't really know where to go, it's like the resources that Arcane and Daphne told you, go ahead and check those out. Go ahead and check out Crow Academy. That is crowacademy.com. I'll plug it again. And
Thank you.
and just have fun with it. And guys, this has been another episode of Tomb Talks with the Pharaoh, and I'll see you guys next week.